Oh, well, Devils fans, welcome to another episode of the Jersey Devils Brocast, live on Radio Garden State, as always, coming at you Tuesday nights, 9 to 10 o'clock. Listen in, RadioGardenState.com, Odyssey app, TuneIn app, radio.net. Man, I would say there's been a lot of news for the New Jersey Devils in the last week or so, especially in the last 24 hours. We have a lot to talk about tonight. This is one of those shows. I'm going solo tonight. I think Reese probably knew. I got a lot to say. We got to give this guy 60 full minutes of uninterrupted time to get his thoughts, prayers, and everything else out because there is a whole lot to digest here. I'm sure many of you, as I was all day today, reading up on the Fitzgerald decisions and with the future of the team and everything else. So we're going to get to all of that tonight. I'm going to start off with a little digestion of this decision and how it happened. Go over the legacy of Tom Fitzgerald. Maybe I'll even give him a grade to sum it all up. And then the future. Hopefully it's bright here for the Devils. The other options on the table. We all have heard Shanahan and Sonny Maeda. All that name out there in combination. I've been saying it with all you fans on Facebook. I think I put it up this morning at like 5:45 a.m. Hey, I think that would be a great combo. And I think it's almost too obvious because almost everybody else seems to think the same thing. But before that, we will be back at Prudential Center April 9th, this Thursday. Me and Chris from Radio Garden State and probably our buddy Tom. Our beautiful country music on Friday afternoon, courtesy of Tom Daly. Big Devils fan, he'll be with us. We'll be on the main concourse before the Penguins game, just like last time. I have our sign-up, QR code, stickers, everything else. I'll probably stay for the press conference again, enjoy myself, soak it all in, because this season is coming to an end. But let's get to some real stuff. Let's get to the real meat and potatoes here. You know, yesterday I had just listened to James Nichols, has a great YouTube show. He's a beat writer for the Devils, New Jersey Hockey Now. Had Johnny Lazarus on from Daily Face-Off. He does Tri-State Hockey Podcast and Morning Cup of Hockey. Great show, really thoughtful. Two thoughtful guys that really understand what's going on around the league. You know, and they kind of said, with the Fitzgerald stuff in the offseason, almost left it at to sum it all up, and maybe I'm wrong, but like kind of a 50-50. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks around in some capacity too. That, he gets along well with ownership. He's well respected around the league. Like this guy, he might stick around in some capacity, or they might just leave him alone and just say, hey, listen, you got one more chance to right the ship here. This is it. And I think that was all kind of maybe many fans have disagreed with that, but I think a reasonable decision. And then within an hour after I finished listening to that, I look at my phone and I see the Devils and Tom Fitzgerald have parted ways. And I was I'm not surprised it happened. I was more or less initially shocked at the timing. I was not expecting that yesterday. When I see Devils news pop up on my phone right now, I'm thinking it's a lineup, it's a scratch. Is Brett Pesce coming back? Is something along those lines? I was not expecting to see that, so I was kind of floored. Actually, one of my coworkers yelled at me in the parking lot as we're leaving work. Hey, Tom Fitzgerald was just let go. And it was shocking. But it's not surprising in the long run. Like, it wouldn't have been surprising if the day after the regular season ended, Fitzgerald was let go. Again, I think it's the timing. And again, I literally just listened to a podcast of two guys that are very well in the know, that know the league, know the game, follow the Devils closely, and kind of felt the same way I did. Frankly, even after being at the game last week, or shows at the game and in the press conference and just seeing Keefe and the players and everyone, I was just sort of getting this vibe for no real tangible reason, but I'm like, I just don't know if a lot's really going to change. I just can see things staying the same. I don't know why, and boy, was I wrong, because a lot has changed. Now, I know a lot of you have asked, I think, the same questions that Toronto Maple Leaf fans have asked, and there's been a lot of criticism with Toronto after letting go of Brad Treliving. If you were going to let the guy go, why not do it before the deadline? Why give him a chance to make trades and very important decisions with this team at the trade deadline? So I'll get to that first. my opinion is if you didn't have a full replacement in mind to hire right on the spot to do the trade deadline, what's the point of putting a lame duck GM in anyway? Isn't it then kind of the same result as Fitzgerald? It's just a guy that just doesn't really, maybe doesn't have a long-term future here and isn't going to be as invested in the trade deadline as they would normally be if the Devils were competitive or if they knew they were going to be here beyond the season, right? So I don't necessarily know if that would have made a difference. I mean, Fitzgerald has been in a trade rumor mill all season long. Maybe there were a lot of things kind of in the trade oven and the hot stove there, and it just didn't come to fruition. And a lot of those things happen over time. It doesn't just happen right away. The phone just doesn't get picked up the morning of the trade deadline. Many of these conversations and trades have been in the works for weeks, months, whole season, going to last year. So maybe ownership just wanted to give him that one last chance to do something, or felt, what's the point of making the change right now? You know, he has a lot of things moving along towards the deadline. Let's just let this go and see how it goes, and we'll make a decision in the offseason. But dominoes around the league are falling, and earlier than usual. Usually this is the night the regular season ends. We see a lot of this happen. The day after, that little weird in-between time between the regular season and the playoffs. These things happen. This news is out there, but teams are getting on it right now. Vegas fired Bruce Cassidy for different reasons to spark a team for a playoff run, okay. But they got John Tortorella, a guy that's a very well-known coach, would have been on the radar this offseason. Pete DeBoer just picked up by the Islanders. And Darch said flat out, we look at this as picking up the best free agent in the offseason because he's arguably the best free agent coach right now. And they got him not just for this year to try and get them into the playoffs as they are faltering, but for the next 4. So they made an offseason decision right now. We said with Toronto, firing Brad Treliving. Now they're starting their search. I'm sure they already have. So all these candidates that are out there, a lot of these people that the fans in New Jersey desperately want, guess what? Toronto does too. Maybe not Shanahan. But Sonny Maeda, all these other guys, you can bet your rear end that the Toronto fans are saying the same exact stuff we are. We're going to be in competition with them. Nashville's going to be looking for a new GM in the offseason. Barry Trotz is going to be stepping down, so I'm sure they've already started that as well, which maybe played a role here with Fitzgerald and the Devils, as the rumor is Fitzgerald might have even approached the Devils and said, if you're going to let me go now so I can get another job. And he's very well connected in Nashville. He was their first captain. He was in their player development program post-career before he went to Pittsburgh. So that's an obvious job for him, and he would be an obvious choice for them. Gives him an opportunity to get a job. But the dominoes are falling. If you want to make a big move this offseason in your front office, coaching staff, etc., you might have to start before the season ends. And I look at this in a way, maybe it's kind of like a trade deadline where you're trading for a guy for the future, but not right now. You know, you're kind of out of the playoffs, but this guy is signed for next year and beyond, so we're making a trade kind of for next year too. And firing a guy like this midseason, bringing someone in right away, it sets you up for next year right away, even if there's still something left this year. You're getting a head start on the offseason. And that's what that kind of is. If you're making a trade for next year right now, you're getting a head start on the offseason. It's basically what you're doing. And I think hiring someone sooner rather than later that can have a full offseason with this team, that can have their people come in, do an analysis, make decisions quickly, have an entire, basically the entire month of May and most of June to then get ready for the draft and get your ducks in a row and get ready to go and figure out the new draft board and whatever that would mean. To figure out even a guy like Sheldon Keefe. To do right by the coaching staff. If you have an administration that can come in fairly soon after the offseason begins and make those decisions. Be fair to Keefe. You're going to let him go. Give him a chance to get another job. Because if he's let go, I can guarantee you he will probably get interviewed by a lot of teams. He's well respected around the league, much like Fitzgerald. These guys will get jobs fairly soon. So give him a chance to do that. And maybe that's part of this too. So with all that said, I can't say I'm surprised, having digested that a little bit, that this happened now. Initially, I was. But taking a step back, thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about the bigger picture of the league, thinking about how things have been working around the league in the last 3 weeks, seeing a lot of movement in the front office, it makes some sense. And it sounds like the Devils might have already started their search. If anything, this might have been, I think Ritzuk had posted something on his Discord? Telegram? Whatever. I'm an older millennial. I'm not in touch with all the social media, with some of it. I'm a MySpace kid, right? It kind of revealed that while he was injured and getting some treatment, that something, some big news was happening with the team. So this decision, and this might have been made days ago. And we're just fine. They just decided to release it now once some other things are in place. And the Devils might have already put the wheels in motion into looking for the replacement and moving forward. And, this is a momentous moment, I think, for the organization. You can't falter with this decision like Toronto did, where you have a young core. You have a core group that is the envy of probably 25 other teams in the league, I'd say, that would love to have Nico and Jack and Bratt and Meyer and Luke Hughes and Simone Nemec. Would love to have some of these veteran guys signed through next year and beyond, like Siegenthaler and Pesce, and even guys, I'll say, like Kovacevic. Guys like Timo Meyer, who I think I already said. Connor Brown, this is a good team on paper. You can't fumble this one and bring in the wrong person, and then you end up like Toronto, where in 2 years we're looking back and wondering, is this the end? When this should have been right in the middle of a cup run. They should have been right in the middle of a dynasty, right in the middle of being a perennial playoff team, being a team that could be much like Carolina at the least, that's making the conference finals often and is making a run and making a push. You don't want to look back on this and say, what if? And if they fumble this decision and they don't replace Fitzgerald with someone who's competent, with someone who's going to put together a strategy and a system that is the best for this roster, regardless of the best system you think is the best of all the systems, you have to pick the one that's the best for this team. If they get the best complementary players for that system and for the guys on this team. And this team is about speed, rush offense, attacking, aggressive in the offensive zone. And you know what? They actually played well defensively doing that a few years ago under Lindy Ruff. Get good goaltending and play like you did a few years ago. The Devils could go places. But do they need some tweaks? Absolutely. But you can't fumble this decision. You have to bring in someone that's going to be accountable, winning culture, and really hit the right buttons to get the most out of a lot of the guys that are here right now and will still be here next year and beyond. But we're going to take a little trip down memory lane here. I figured we'd be doing this in the offseason. But again, decisions happened already. So let's go over a little postmortem on Fitz's career and how did we get here. We're in 2026. Tom Fitzgerald has been fired before the end of the season. So back when Ray Shero came in initially as general manager with Lamoriello staying on as team president, Fitzgerald was the assistant GM under Ray Shero, and then, as we all know, Lou then shortly left. Shortly thereafter, he left to Toronto. Shero took a little bit of a bigger role, but Fitzgerald stayed on as the assistant GM. And then he took on an interim GM basis when Shero left in January of 2020. And kind of going back to those Shero years, because I think it is so important to what has happened today, because it's been kind of a continuation in a lot of ways of those Shero years and the Shero GM family tree. The team had a lot of hype, if you remember that year that Shero left and Fitzgerald took over. The Devils had, I call it the Taylor Hall year of 2018. That was after two really horrible seasons in 16 and 17. They were able to draft Nico. They traded for Taylor Hall. Kyle Palmieri was a really nice story. Had some guys emerging a little bit like Blake Coleman, some secondary guys, third line, fourth line guys like Stefan Nason, etc. They bring in Sammy Vatanen. Will Butcher looked like he was going to be somebody with this team. And the Taylor Hall year of 2018, they made the playoffs. It was a great run. It was a lot of fun. And then injuries hit them hard in 2019, including Taylor Hall. But that offseason, they loaded up with Subban and Simmons and Gusev. They drafted Jack Hughes. It seemed like they were kind of ready to make a jump. And they had a lot of young guys, if you remember, with Butcher and Zaka and Heischer with Bratt. Some other guys like Miles Wood that we were expecting a little bit more out of offensively, they all seemed like they were ready to take that step forward, and then the following season ended up being an unmitigated disaster. There was a ton of air in the balloon to start that season, and then by mid-October, the air was out. There was no air left. I had never seen that happen up to that point in my entire life as a sports fan. As a fan, I'm a fan of the Mets, by the way. I've seen everything. But to see it, just the season be over within 2 or 3 weeks was insane. And if you remember, shortly thereafter, Taylor Hall was traded. Shiro steps down in January. And, Fitzgerald took over what was a very difficult situation. So we have to give him some credit here, too. That was a very hard spot to be in. A team that was in the middle of a rebuild that just looked like they needed to take about 10 to 20 steps backwards before they could even take one forward. And to his credit, he had the balls to do that. He made a lot of trades to tear it down and start over. Travis Zajac, Blake Coleman, Andy Green, just to name a few. He hired Lindy Ruff that following offseason. And after a few years of letting the young guys come up, trying to be kind of tactical with some signings, bringing in Hamilton, which was a big deal at the time, kind of put the Devils back on the map. Bringing in Palat that 1 year to try and bring in a veteran top 6 forward, and we'll talk about that later because that's complicated. But then the Devils eventually in 2023 had their best regular season in franchise history. They beat the Rangers in the first round, and it was the height of the Fitzgerald administration. It was the high watermark. They lose to Carolina the second round. But I think we were all pretty happy and satisfied at the conclusion of that season. The Devils seemed poised to be a contender for the foreseeable future. A little different than 2018, right? The 2018 felt like we were riding Taylor Hall and to a lesser extent Keith Kincaid. 23, that was a team. That was Hughes and Heischer and Bratt and bringing in Meyer. And the play of guys like Halla and McLeod and Palat being clutch as hell in the playoffs. The defense being fairly complete with Hamilton, and that was Hamilton, Severson, Graves, Siegenthaler, John Marino, a fairly complete group back there. Luke Hughes stepping in, that it just seemed the future was bright, and we all, 2024, Stadium Series game was a lot of fun, but the rest of the season wasn't, not so much. Derailed by injuries, horrific goaltending. And I think the common criticism from that year was that Fitzgerald didn't do enough early on to fix the goalie situation. That essentially bombed the season. Ruff was let go halfway through. Travis Green took over as interim head coach, and the Devils missed the playoffs. I believe they had 81 points in 82 games. And what I think then happened after the 24 season was an overreaction, a change of style that I don't think was necessary. It was a reaction to losing to Carolina in 23, I think an overreaction to underachieving in 24. If the goaltending situation had been figured out earlier, or if the goalies they had just played the way they had the year before, I think the Devils would have made the playoffs. I think bad goaltending is like a bad bullpen in baseball. Now everybody from the starting staff to your defenders in the field to your offense feels like they have to be perfect because your bullpen is going to give up about 6 runs at some point, and you just can't score enough. If you have bad goaltending, it's the same exact premise. You can never score enough, and you have to play perfect defense or you're going to get burned. And I think that wears a team down, that kills the morale of a team. Being a defenseman and having a goalie behind you that can't stop the puck is demoralizing. To try doing that 82 times, it is very hard to do. And I think a little bit of that happened. The Devils got sloppy by trying to play too perfect. And I think there was an overreaction. Like they had to change their style in order to be competitive. And I just don't think that was the case. I think they needed better goaltending. Better goaltending and a few better players. But they tried to change their system and initially worked under Keefe. And then last year, 2025, they played great through the end of December. January, February, not so much. Then the absolute tsunami of injuries occurred, if you remember. And the Devils entered the playoffs with a banged-up team, lose to Carolina. Carolina had a fairly easy time in 5 games. Nemec with the OT goal was nice. But the Devils were so banged up, it was like their C-minus team. So it felt like Fitzgerald almost had 2 years that were kind of like, all right, we're giving you a break on these. We're banged up, you're injured. The goaltending was horrible. I'm not going to say out of nowhere, but those guys played some of their career worst years. Vanacek and Schmid. Nico Dawes didn't really look ready. They brought in Jake Allen later in the season, but it was already too late. But if they had made those moves earlier, then maybe it would have been better. And that was the criticism, is that Fitzgerald didn't make a move and wasn't kind of have that conviction to, like, we got to do this now. We can't wait this long. We have to do something now, which leads to some of the bad decisions, I think, this year. But last year, again, 2025, teams banged up. We all know the Jack Hughes injury. Hamilton got hurt. Siegenthaler got hurt. Luke Hughes got hurt. Dillon got hurt in the playoffs. Kovacevic got hurt in the playoffs. I mean, the team, by the time you got to the end of that first round, it was almost an unrecognizable lineup. And it was virtually a team of a few good NHL players with a lot of AHL guys. It was tough. It was brutal. So he gets a pass. But now this year, it's been different. Started off great through mid-November, one of the best teams in hockey. Through mid-November, the team, one of the few teams that beat Colorado. Through mid-November, a team that viewed as a potential number one seed in the Eastern Conference. And then one bad night in Chicago turns into an unmitigated disaster. And I think, to me, I'll remember this season by the lack of conviction to make moves to turn things around, much like the goaltending situation in 24. It's a little bit of a theme. You know, they lose 9-0 to the Islanders, which was bad enough. I think it was even worse that they came out as flat as they did the next game against Pittsburgh. And no one got fired. No one got let go. No one got set down. No one got scratched. It took a while before they even started a healthy scratch, kind of recognizable names like Dougie Hamilton. And I just think the lack of change to try and get things going led them to this point where maybe if they made a change in mid-December, whether it was Keefe's fault or not, maybe that would have put a bit of a fire under their rear end. Some of these other guys that are more than capable of stepping up would have stepped up and then would have put the Devils in a position where instead of talking about a GM getting fired, we would have been talking about how important this game was tonight to clinch a playoff spot. I think that lack of conviction over the years during the season, no, he did trade for Timo Meier, but I think that lack of conviction to really all right, we need to make a 180 right now, and I need to make a bold move, has ended up where we are. And I think the other part of the story this year was the Quinn Hughes stuff. Another one. Yeah, you got to have a set of balls to make a trade like Minnesota did for Quinn Hughes. And Lamoriello did stuff like that. He traded for Kovalchuk, gave up at the time, seemed like a lot. They gave up a lot for Alexander Mogilny. I bring that trade up all the time because it changed a lot for the Devils in that next year and a half from 2 Stanley Cup Finals appearances. Gave up your best prospect in Brendan Morrison. Dennis Peterson was a hell of a young player. You got to give up good young players to get players that can help you now, especially the second best defenseman in the league who was willing to waive his no-trade clause to come to your team. If anything, you were the team he wanted to go to, and you didn't get him. And I recognize there's a lot of other things outside of that. Cap space. Minnesota maybe just could put together a better package. But the fact that the Devils still couldn't pull that off, I just think that had such an effect on the fan base, on the perception of the organization. It sounds like the rumors are that had an impact on the locker room from guys wondering, am I staying? Am I about to get traded for Quinn Hughes? To the guys going, we kind of really needed that guy to get going, and then they just couldn't get going. A guy like Quinn that almost certainly would have stayed in New Jersey. And I know we can wait till next year and sign him and not move anyone. But if you want to win this year, you got to, I don't know. You got to make those moves and you got to do those things. And that's kind of how we ended up here. And that lack of conviction and decisiveness midseason, I think, is going to be remembered as a major reason for his downfall. Because his first few years and I'd even say through most of last year, I don't think Fitzgerald's job was ever really in jeopardy. And if anything, he still is well regarded around the league. He's a well-respected ex-player, front office executive, whatever you want to call it around the league. There's a lot of respect for Tom Fitzgerald. And honestly, how will I remember Tom Fitzgerald in his time here in New Jersey? First, the lack of conviction. I'll go with the negatives. Lack of conviction, decisiveness midseason. That's going to be probably number one. And I'm always going to feel like if they made that coaching change, if they made that big trade, if they did those things to just kind of put a fire under everybody's ass, that would have made a difference. And they didn't really do that. Whether it was the goaltending in 2024 or this year with the coaching change or something, trade for Quinn Hughes. I think Keefe is a good coach. I don't think Keefe is necessarily the problem. And I don't like to advocate for people to get fired and lose their job. These are people. Fitzgerald has kids. I mean, he loves New Jersey. He's lived here for 10 years now. Sheldon Keefe is a well-respected coach in this league. He's going to get if he gets let go, he'll get a job very quickly and for a good reason. Right? But I still think at the time, Robbie Ftorek was a great coach. The Devils needed a change. Larry Robinson won a cup with this team as a head coach and an assistant. But guess what? In 2006, Devils really needed a change. It is what it is. After Lemaire in 98, Jacques Lemaire stepped down. Devils needed a change. That's the way it works. It's the way the league works. Great people, great coaches, great front office staff. Sometimes you got to make those hard decisions and let them go. It's easier said than done. But I thought there was a moment there in mid-December where we're going to make this the low point of the season. We're making a big change right now. And Pete DeBoer was out there. John Tortorella was out there. Peter Laviolette was out there. Who else? What other under-the-radar names, up-and-coming coaches, whoever else, to make a move and to make a big change? I just felt like that was the time, and then they missed it. And that was an opportunity to turn the season around while it was still salvageable. They were still very much in the mix. And that change never really happened. Really, the change was Hughes going to the Olympics, getting a golden goal, and coming back and putting a team on his back, since that's been the big change. But I thought they needed a change much earlier than that. It was a little too late. And I also think that trying to adjust this team to be a 200-foot style team to win in the playoffs, I think that's going to go down as a negative too. I think it was just overdone a little too much. I get it. And I said the same thing. Yeah, we got to learn how to play defense and win tight games, score some dirty goals. These games that you don't have a lot of room, they have to learn how to still win in those games. But that doesn't mean that needs to be your identity. Your identity can still be we're fast-paced, we're aggressive, we're fast, supportive, attack, or the Ray Shero mantra. You can still do that, but learn how to adjust when you play these teams that are going to really limit your chances, when you play the Carolinas. And the best teams in the league do that. They can win in various ways. There's the way they win the best and the way they would prefer, and then there's the other ways that they can adjust and they still have the personnel and they have the ability, period, to still win those games. And the Devils are just kind of lost their identity, and they're starting to regain it a little bit now over the last few weeks, though not tonight, down 5-1 versus Philadelphia. I'm not even giving you updates on the game because it's just not pretty. But they lost their identity, and I think it was that they compensated way too much after losing to Carolina in the season in 24. I think it was just too much. Got to let these guys fly. This isn't the Devils team of yesteryear where we're going to be tight defense, heavy teams. This is a team that's got to fly. And in order to work on their weaknesses, they neutered their strengths. And you can't do that. You still are who you are. And they tried to be something they weren't, and they paid a price for that too. But I'll also remember Fitzgerald as a guy that actually, I think he put together some pretty good rosters. I don't think he ever really put together a team in the last three seasons. This year, last year, year before, I'd even go 23 to an extent, where people thought, oh, this is terrible. Devils are going to be awful. I think for the most part, they're universally accepted they're going to be in the playoffs. That's not because he picked up bad players. That's not because he made moves that made very little sense at the time. It's because he actually did a lot of sensible moves and made a lot of trades that he got great grades on. And most of them aged pretty well. I mean, just thinking back on a few offhand, the Haula for Zacha trade, I've seen that. Well, I don't think Zacha was ever going to play well in Jersey. I think we're just kind of past that point here. He needed a change of scenery, and he needed top 6 minutes, and he wasn't going to get that down the middle here with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. And Haula did everything needed him to do his first 2 years here in 23 and 24. Last year is what it is. He had a bad year, but otherwise I thought he did everything he was supposed to do. He was a great third-line center that was able to move up and down the lineup. He did everything we wanted. I even the other traits for Markstrom. Kevin Ball's a nice defenseman, but he was never a can't-miss guy. The trade for Toffoli, Sharon Govich is a nice player. He could fit still somewhere on this team, but he certainly is not a can't-miss guy who's like leading the charge in Calgary. He's a nice player. It upset me more that they never replaced Toffoli's production when they traded him to Winnipeg. Would have been nice to keep him around for the next few years. The trade, I already said the trade for Marshall. The trade for Meyer. It was Andreas Janssen, Nikita Okadyuk, Muka Medulin, a few picks, Zetterland. Did any of them really turn into can't-miss players? Zetterland's a solid guy. Love to have him back. Muka Medulin could still be a very good defenseman, but none of these guys turned into can't-miss players. I can't really think of a trade where it was like, wow, that was ridiculous. How could he do that? If anything, on the trade front, he actually always pretty much made out pretty well. He should get pretty decent grades with that. I think the signing of the contracts is where things get a little different. The Polak contract did not age well. I think the Hamilton contract aged exactly as everyone, including the Devils, probably expected. And Hamilton in 23 was a major reason why they made the playoffs and had the year that they did and set some team records in the meantime. I think he's tied for the most goals scored in a season by a defenseman. That worked out. The Markstrom extension, I don't think that's going to age well. I sure hope I'm wrong because I love Markstrom, but, I don't know about that. The Luke Hughes extension, a lot of people are down on. I think it's still a little early on that, but we'll see. I think the Connor Brown signing has been great. Dadonov did not work. Glendening was Glendening. I really can't think of too many of those that would go, oh, wow. And the no movement, no trade clauses, that's going on around the league, period. That's a problem. If you go on Puckpedia and count every single team, how many players have a no movement, no trade clause. Almost every team has around 10. So the Devils have a few more, but not by much. It's kind of standard issued at this point. I know it's been a big topic, but I don't know. And then Brendan Dillon signing. Dillon's done exactly as what we expected. Brett Pesce, exactly what we expected. Siegenthaler's contract's been solid. Kovacevic, that's one I'm not so sure. I like Kovacevic, but $4 million a year when you had Nemec and Hamilton and on the right side with Pesce just seems a little crowded. That I would have much rather have seen $4 million spent on a top 6 forward, top 9 forward, and give him a little bit more pop in offense. Maybe that was just a better allocation of that money. Kovacevic has had a rough year because of injuries this year. We'll see how he bounces back next year if he's still here. But again, the contracts, I get it. But, Jake Allen is barely made. He's $1.5 million a year. I think the Markstrom one is the one that could really burn him in the long run. The Polak contract did not age well at all, and he was a very big disappointment during the regular season. In the playoffs, he was pretty good, but regular season-wise, he wasn't very good at all. Overall, I thought he put together some rosters that were competitive. Go back and look at all the preseason predictions around the league, from Yahoo Sports to ESPN to TSN to Sportsnet to Sports to SNY and everybody. Daily Faceoff, the hockey guy on YouTube. All the best people in the game all pretty much had the Devils pegged as a playoff team. That's not because Fitzgerald put together a bad team. I just don't think he pushed the right buttons and set up a system with Keefe to get the most out of this team. And constructing the team, he seems to do a fairly good job. It's kind of the other stuff that was lacking. And like I already said, missing out on Quinn Hughes this year, that was huge. But in the long run, too, I think the drafting and developing has been an issue and has burned him as well. Missing out on Alexander Holtz, I think that's a huge one. You have a pick, top 10 first-round pick, and you miss that big on a guy like Holtz. Geez, I don't know. And Holtz didn't turn into anything. He had, I think, one good game with Vegas this year. He had 3 or 4 goals, and he hasn't done anything else. I don't know what the issue is, but that hurts. That hurts a lot when you get a pick like that and a guy that you're kind of looking at as, all right, he should be stepping in and being our number one scoring winger, guy that has 40-goal potential, and he can barely break 10 goals in a season. It's tough. And I don't think he drafted well deep in the draft, where you would hope to see those late picks, some from 19, 20, 21, maybe 22, starting to either make the lineup or have an impact, and there's very few. Dawson Mercer, I think at that pick in that draft was a pretty solid one. But, Muka Medulin really hasn't done much. Chase Stillman, it doesn't seem like he's going to do much. Silyaev in Russia, still the jury's out, but seems like to pick a big stay-at-home defenseman, I think he was 6th overall. I don't know. I want a guy with some serious talent that high in the draft. Stay-at-home defenseman, you can grab there's a dime a dozen later on in the draft. Puck-moving defensemen, scoring wingers, great scoring two-way centerman. That's who you're looking for in the top 10. So we'll see how that one ages. Yegorov looks like he could be a great pick. But again, I just think overall, for this team to have lost as much as they have and to not have some of these later picks pan out, yeah, they traded a few first-rounders, second-rounders, but they did recoup some too in some trades, like the Toffoli trade, etc. But to not really hit well on a lot of them, or to have like a group of guys like, yeah, he didn't turn into a top 6 forward, but man, he's been a hell of a bottom 6 guy. They just haven't had many of them. Hami Naho could still work out. Gritzio could still certainly work out. Nemec could still work out. It could be a different narrative 2 or 3 years. That's a grade that could certainly change. But as of right now, drafting and developing hasn't been nearly as good as I think people were hoping, especially in 2020, 21, 22, and 24. These picks that they had to not have really any of them deep in the draft come out and really perform or have everyday roles, that's tough. And now that's hard because those are guys that don't make a whole lot. That frees up some cap space. So I think that hurts too. But I'm going to give Fitz overall here a B-. I think generally good moves, constructed good rosters that were universally considered competitive. But he couldn't push the right buttons to move this team out of the rebuild or finding our identity mode and was unable to spark the team in any way when things got off the rails in the regular season. And that's on the players too, by the way, as a side note. The Devils, the best years, they lost guys. They started a season without some good players due to injury or contract holdouts. From Arnott to Niedermeyer, just to name some guys off the top of my head. Elias was injured a few times. He didn't play 82 games every year. Zach Parise didn't play 82 games every year. Even Marty, 2008, you lost the greatest goalie of the game, and the Devils actually went on a run. They figured it out. Every time the Devils lose Jack Hughes, you can't just totally crap your pants. And when you still have Nico Hischier and Bratt and Meyer and Mercer and all these guys in your lineup, and you can't be a 500 team with that kind of crew, that's a problem. And do I think that's a top-down problem? It might be. But the players got to take a long look at themselves too. And I think when stuff like this happens, it forces them to do that. Judging by the quotes today in the locker room from Hischier and Bratt and Meyer and Hughes, I think they certainly are. But you can't crap your pants like that when you lose one good player. Last year was one thing. This year, they had some injuries beginning of the year. That was when they were playing their best. When they got relatively healthy, minus Jack Hughes, they sucked. You can't do that. Championship teams don't do that. Competitive teams don't do that. You find a way. You still have a great centerman in Nico. Still have a top-line winger in Bratt. You have a 40-goal scorer in Meyer. You have a guy like Mercer that we've been waiting for to kind of arrive offensively. Cody Glass has had a nice year. Gritzuk and Brown, that line, that was solid. The defense was still pretty good, on paper at least. Yeah, the goaltending was what it was, but in large part this year, I think you can argue it was also because the team didn't play well. It was a mix of both there. But you can't let that happen. And then the GM was unable to spark the team and get him out of it, to fire a coach, to make a big trade. Again, fire Keefe, get Quinn Hughes, the two that come to mind. And he couldn't get things off the rails midseason. So I'll give him a B-. I think he took over a bad situation, laid the foundation for a lot of success that could still be had, and he should get credit for that. If the Devils have a great year next year with pretty much a very similar cast, he should get some credit for that. And also, Fitzgerald sold the state of New Jersey very well. Don't forget that. All of us proud New Jerseyans, Fitzgerald really sold this state well to guys like Hamilton and Palat and Timo Meier and Connor Brown and Markstrom and Allen. The Devils in New Jersey was never a destination unless, it was almost the guys that didn't really care about the location, or really it was more of a, they realized you could actually raise your kids in some beautiful neighborhoods around here. But for the most part, it was tough to get people to come to Jersey, both in front office to players. And that's been well documented in the past. To compete against New York, Chicago, Detroit, L.A., and the Toronto, Montreal markets, and Philly and Boston. I hate to say it, but it is what it is. Let's call it what it is. But Jersey is now, a lot of young guys go out in the Hoboken on the weekends this summer or in September. You're going to see a lot of young Devils bebopping around in Jersey City as well. It's a great place to play hockey. And Fitzgerald sold it very well, and he was proud to be here in New Jersey. So let's not forget that, too. He deserves some credit for that. I'm not just going to totally crap on the guy out the door. He is a person here. And let's remember that, too, before we start screaming for people to get fired. This is a guy with a family, with kids. I'm sure he'll be okay. He's still going to get paid. He'll get another job. But he sold New Jersey well. He called it a hidden gem in the league. He did a great job selling the state to free agents, to coaches. Overall, B- for Fitzgerald. We certainly wish him the best. We will probably be going over these topics a lot in the next few weeks. But it's 9:42. Devils just lost 5-1 to Philly. I don't think that's surprising considering the news. They were going to come out with an uninspired performance as ownership is kind of punted on the season. And though the Devils, I don't know if they're mathematically eliminated at this point. I'd imagine they are. They weren't coming into the night, but all intents and purposes, they were. And it is what it is. But now, let's look at the future. No music break tonight. I got too much to talk about. I'm all hopped up on an iced coffee. I had a high sodium dinner, which is not good, by the way, but my blood pressure's through the roof and I'm ready to go. So we're just going to keep on rolling tonight. No music breaks tonight. So what's next for the Devils? As I said, a lot of Devils fans and myself, we're talking about Shanahan and Sonny Maeda, and it seems like everyone else around the league sees that as that is the fit. Both the experts and the casual fans like myself see that as, that's a fit. And I'd say this is why. So Shanahan, for me, would be my choice for president of hockey operations. I wouldn't have someone come in and do both roles again. Change that up a little bit. I think Shanahan's a perfect guy to kind of be the oversight guy. He's so well connected around the league, too, much like Fitzgerald. I mean, a Hall of Fame player immediately gets the respect of a locker room if he's got to go in there and, speak to players or whatever he feels he has to do. I think he'd have the clout, much like Marty, to say and do whatever the hell he wants because he's Brendan Shanahan. He's a guy that has a lot of roots here in New Jersey, in the metropolitan area, started his career here. Thankfully, he signed in St. Louis and got Scott Stevens. Came back and ended his career here in New Jersey. It was a really nice story. He was a champion in Detroit. Is listed as one of the 100 greatest players in NHL history, and for good reason. Was kind of the prototypical power forward scorer of the 90s, early 2000s. And had a great career. Unfortunately, played for the Rangers for a little bit. But familiar with the metropolitan area, very familiar with New Jersey, the Devils franchise. Roots here. He was here for Johnny McKnight with the Ring of Honor. And also, just let's look at what he did in his post-playing career. And went to the NHL office for a period of time in various roles. Then took over the Maple Leafs when they were a dumpster fire and a laughingstock of the league. And I know they didn't meet the expectations, but sometimes you got to look at where a general manager, president of hockey operations, coach or whatever, where did they start with this team and where did things end? Toronto started as one of the worst teams in the league and they ended as a perennial playoff contender that was a 100-point guaranteed team during the season. And yeah, they fell short of expectations in the playoffs, 100%. But from where they were to where they ended up, I think Shanahan did a pretty good job. And there were mistakes made along the way. Of course there were. And no, they did not win a cup. But guess what? There aren't a lot of guys with Stanley Cup pedigree out there. And in fact, Lou Lamoriello didn't even work in the league before he took over. Jacques Lemaire never coached a team to a Stanley Cup before he came here. Larry Robinson, his record as a coach with L.A. for a period of time was so bad, they traded Wayne Gretzky. And Pat Burns thought he was never going to get a job in the league again before Lou Lamoriello called. Fell short in Toronto, made the finals in Montreal, didn't do too well in Boston. So this idea that you have to bring in a guy that's won a Stanley Cup, well, the majority of times you're not going to. You're going to bring in a guy like Shanahan that has a very good track record, or maybe he learned a lot in Toronto. Maybe there were some decisions that he'd like to take back that if the opportunity arose, maybe he'd make the right one now. And as a guy with the kind of contacts in the league, as well respected, I'm sure, by owners as well, with his connections in the league and in the office of the league itself, and the communication, I'm sure, with ownership groups throughout the league. Then as president of hockey operations recently in Toronto, his connections with other general managers and presidents in the league. I think he'd be a great fit to be that guy that oversees it. And also as a former player, to have an understanding of what it's like to be a player. I think that'd be great. And then to me, I'd have Sonny Maeda as the GM. I feel like it's obvious. First of all, Jersey guy from Wyckoff, and anyone who knows me personally, that town is near and dear to my heart. I could pass a street quiz right now in Wyckoff. I dare you. Ramapo High School guy, played hockey there, go Raiders. And then he started the New Jersey Devils analytical team in 2014, so he already has a connection with the team. Then he went on to become the assistant general manager in Florida, won 2 cups. Big story I was totally unaware of, by the way, was that he had Jesper Bratt number 3 on his board going into the 2016 draft. Almost everyone else had him not even in. Devils picked him in the 6th round. But that's something else. That tells you he knows a little something. And maybe for a while, it's like kind of like the David Stern stuff with the Mets or whatever. It's like, yeah, he's not a hockey. He didn't play baseball. Or maybe he did, like Maeda did in high school or whatever. But, he didn't have a professional career. Didn't play in the minors, right? But the analytics, I think we're going away from, it has to be former players, former coaches all the time, to guys that are just understand the game and are deep thinkers. And understand all the new ways of analyzing the game and judging players. It's different. Like plus minus is almost, many people view it as a meaningless stat now. And he's led the way with that, and the results have been there. He's had an impact in Florida. And that's a guy I think deserves a shot to run the everyday, to make the roster decisions. And maybe he has a familiarity here with some of the players here in Jersey, but now it's a fresh look too. It's a guy that was just in an organization that won 2 Stanley Cups and could bring some of that here, and I think this team could really use it. I mean, I've seen his name more than everybody else. I think that from the fans. I think the fans would love that. It's a great story, which I don't think is a good reason, personally. I'm not into the great stories. I want the right people that can make the right decisions. But both guys, it'd be a great story. For Shanahan, kind of a full circle moment coming back to Jersey. We drafted him in 87, Hall of Fame career, ended his playing career in Jersey. And Lamoriello was just going to be team president, and the day-to-day was going to be Ray Shero. That lasted all of a month, and Shanahan got Lamoriello to go to Toronto, and then Lamoriello ran the everyday up there as GM. A lot of connections here with Jersey and the history of this team and the franchise that I think that would be a cool story. And Sonny Maeda grew up in New Jersey, in Wyckoff, played hockey, analytical darling of the league, started the analytical department for the Devils. I think that'd be great. And I think that'd be a really good combo, and it just seems almost too obvious. But again, to circle back a little bit to what I said earlier tonight. By the way, I just saw Curtis Lazar score a hell of a goal for Edmonton. Not to rub any salt in the wounds here. But to go kind of full circle here with that, these changes kind of have to happen now. You can't wait till the offseason begins because some of these guys might get picked up. By the way, Adam Henrique with the assist, so there we go. 2 former Devils having a very nice night. But you have to make these decisions now. The dominoes are falling, and they're going. These guys are going to get picked up. The best candidates for these front office positions will get picked up quickly. Start now. I hope by the end of next week they have somebody. They have this in place. And let's just get rolling and let's just get this going. Let's get the draft board going. Let's figure out what are we going to do with the coaching staff. And to guys like Keefe and Breland and Colleton and all these guys, you owe it to them too to not just I mean, these are people. Would you want to just be in limbo for weeks wondering if you're going to have a job next year? Wondering if you have to look for a new job or you have to move your entire family across the country? I wouldn't. I'd want to know now. Tell me now. You keeping me or you dumping me? What are we doing? Don't use the it's not you, it's me line. Just tell me straight up. Don't be George Costanza. Tell me straight up. Am I staying or going? And I think with the Devils here, they've kind of that's the direction they're trending in. Am I staying? Am I going? I think Keefe, you bring in a new front office quickly, you can make those decisions. And then I think it's important going into the draft that you have an idea of what you want to accomplish during the draft, not just by drafting players, but the trade options that are out there. I mean, we've all heard, I was talked about James Nichols and Johnny Lazarus talking about Brady Tkachuk. I've mentioned this on our show too. A lot of people have, how he seems like an obvious fit for the Devils if he's looking for a change of scenery, which I'm not sure he is yet, by the way. Ottawa has been fairly competitive. I'm not totally sold that he wants out, but if that is on the table, you'd want to have the front office fairly familiar with the players in this organization, have done a thorough run-up on what's going on, really understand the market and what's happening, what is a fair price for Brady Tkachuk right now, and be fairly in touch with what's going on, and not coming in and having to make a decision 3 days in. You want him to be well-adjusted, ready to go, informed. So I think that's important. That's why I'd make a change. I mean, even a coaching change, I'd let Keefe know. I'd make that front office change ASAP, even if that means within a week or two, get it done. Let Keefe know if he's staying or going. I think the front office should have the right to make that decision on their own if they think Keefe fits or not. I don't think it works to just keep the coach for the sake of doing it. I don't think that ever works. I think you have to let the front office make that decision. Is this coach going to pull in the same direction as us? Does they fit the vision? Is this a coach that's going to put in a system that will work with this team? Because not every coach can do that. Bruce Cassidy's a kind of more of a Lamoriello guy, right? He's going to be a heavy team, attention to detail, fairly strict defense. Does that fit this team? I'm not sure. But let's get that going now and make those decisions quickly so then we can move in the offseason and get better going in next season. Because that's what's most important right now. But it's 9:53. Thank you all for listening tonight, as always. So, again, we will be at Prudential Center on April 9th, me with Chris from Radio Garden State. Sounds like Tom will be joining us again. That was a lot of fun. The three of us had a blast last week. I'm really, really looking forward to Thursday night. Devils, Penguins. See some legends from the Pittsburgh guys for maybe one last time. We don't know who's staying in the league, who's going. It sounds like Ovechkin might have to make that decision himself. Could be going back to Russia this offseason. So, yeah, we'll be there April 9th. Look for us again. For those of you that stopped by the last time, stop by again. Say hey. For those of you that see all of our posts on Facebook and Instagram, watch our videos on YouTube, come on by and say hey. We're going to have a microphone ready to go. Come on up. Discuss what you want to see the Devils do in the offseason. We have a few topics for everybody to talk about. But again, that'll be Thursday night, April 9th. There'll be live main concourse before the game. And as always, you can listen to Radio Garden State on the Odyssey app, TuneIn app, and radio.net, and radiogardenstate.com. Radio Garden State also has a Patreon that you can subscribe to get recordings of all of the Radio Garden State shows, music, and everything else going on. Visit radiogardenstate.com for that. So, everything else going around the league, I know just a quick note before we end, because I keep seeing this left and right about, the Devils have more wins than a lot of teams that are in the playoffs. And, I do understand that argument, and I get that. And it is frustrating that the Devils should be a game or two out of a playoff spot, but they're not. but also everyone plays by the same rules. I don't like the fact that the Kings are really way under 500 in any other metric but the way the NHL does it. I don't think that's fair. I don't like the fact that the Central Division teams, it looks like Minnesota and Dallas are playing each other in the first round. That should be a semifinal round or a conference final. That should not be in the first round. There's a few things I don't like, but I don't necessarily think it's unfair to the Devils. The Devils played like crap from mid-November through the end of February. Spin it any way you want. Everyone's playing by the same rules. You're going to lose in overtime. Get a point out of it. The Devils didn't. They just didn't lose in overtime. Actually, they won, and they have a great record in overtime, but the games they lost, they didn't get to overtime. If anything, they let the game get way out of hand in the third period, and they never had a chance to do that. Out of all of their losses, you take 6-7 losses and lose in overtime, take a few of those other losses and just win, period. That's another 10, 12 points right there, and that's not that out of reach. And there's a lot of games that the Devils lost against bad teams or teams that they should have been competitive against, teams they should have been going to overtime against at the least, and they didn't do it. So I get that argument. I totally understand it, and I'm frustrated by it too. Because if this were Major League Baseball, the Kings wouldn't have a chance at the playoffs. But in hockey, they do. Is that fair? Probably not. Again, and I don't like the wild card matchups. I like the 1v8. 2v7, all that. I thought that was a fair way to do it, where you do give those teams in the top of the conference. And now with two divisions, I think it's even easier to do that because, the two division champions get the 1 and 2 spot. It used to be a little strange with the Southeast Division was kind of garbage in the late 90s, and they'd get like the third spot with 90 points, and everyone else had over 100, and it was kind of strange. But now with just the Metro and Atlantic Division, I think the 1-2 teams are the 1-2 teams anyway. They win the division. They get home ice, automatic 1 or 2 seed no matter what. So there's a benefit to that. And then the other teams get to play, if you have a top seed, if you're third or fourth, you're going to get home ice advantage, and you're going to play a lower seed or a team that you are better than. The 1 and 2 teams get home ice advantage and play the bottom 2 teams, no questions asked. And I know that's kind of the way it is now, but again, the Central Division is the one that kind of bothers everybody, and I get it. It bothers me too. I don't like it either. It takes away a lot of the excitement in the playoffs and that build-up. I'd much rather play the Rangers in the conference finals than the first round. It just means a lot more to kick the shit out of them in the conference finals in the first round. It's like the Mets. I'd much rather beat the Phillies in the NLCS than the first round, but the Mets will never make the playoffs again anyway. So I'll just always be disappointed by them. But I'd like to see the NHL make some changes. I understand everyone's frustrations, but let's also call it what it is. That's not why the Devils are missing the playoffs. They're missing the playoffs because the Devils let the season get out of control. Like a golf round. You got to damage control everybody. If you're not playing well for a few holes, you end up with maybe 2 or 3 bogeys, you can come back from that. If you get 2 or 3 triples, you're not. The Devils had about 8 triple bogeys in a row. The round was totally cooked. They had no chance. They can play their ass off all they want from March through April, but the season was already done. The way the league does the playoffs or not doesn't really matter because the Devils didn't play well enough to make the playoffs. That's on the team. That's not the league rules. That's not on some conspiracy to keep the Devils out. The Devils just simply didn't play well enough, and the Devils didn't have the resiliency to play well enough when they lost Jack Hughes. So I only got about 30 seconds left. Again, thank you, everyone, for listening. We're going to take a look at seeing if we can get the audio for this up on YouTube for anyone that wants to listen tomorrow, for everyone on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for following us. You can follow us, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We'll be live at the Prudential Center April 9th. Please come check us out. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And I am Jim Bacalar. You call me J-Bake. Radio Garden State, Jersey Devils Brocast, signing off. Let's go Devils.